Hey, welcome to the Let's Talk About It podcast. I am your host, Larry Parker, and I have my wife, Courtney Parker, here, and we're going to interview Sophie Tierney. So let's go after it, let's get it, let's talk about it. Okay, so welcome, Sophie. Why don't you tell us about yourself?
I am currently a junior communications major at Houghton College, and I'm just here to answer your questions.
So you're going into junior year, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
am.
All
I'm going
right.
into my junior year.
All right. That's exciting. That's
Yeah, it is
exciting.
super exciting.
So we like to start off with a general question, so
Okay,
everyone gets to know who you really are,
okay.
because you can tell who someone really is by what kind of movies they watch.
Oh, goodness.
So, what are your three favorite movies?
That's really hard to narrow it down. Um, I think my three favorite might be a movie called One Day, which is
Okay,
amazing.
who's in it?
Anne Hathaway and Jim Sturgis.
Okay,
He's really great.
all right,
But yeah,
all right.
and I love The Gladiator.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
one's a
that's a
good
good
one.
one.
And
It's a really good one.
I think the new Fantastic Beasts series
Oh,
that came out recently.
all right. Isn't that tied with the Harry Potter world?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
I
right.
actually I never read the books, but because like I wasn't allowed to growing up, because
Uh,
my mom is super against it. But
well, yeah.
now I like the movies. So I
Okay.
like the Fantastic Beasts series a lot more than the
Harry
original
Potter?
series. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So now do you read the books?
No, I haven't even read them yet
Okay.
because they're so long and I don't have time.
Okay, yeah. No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
But I think the people, the hardcore fans, like, you got to read the book,
I know.
right?
I
Got
know
to
I
read
get
the
that a
book.
lot.
All right. So we're just gonna talk today to Sophie about her life. She grew up Christian,
hmm
and we want to just know about growing up Christian,
Yeah.
right? So what's your current living situation?
I currently live with my parents when I'm not at school for the majority of the time. So during the summer, I just come back home and stay with my parents. And hopefully that'll change
Right.
after college. But we'll see what happens.
That's all right.
Yeah,
You're gone most of the year,
yeah, I am.
living on campus, and
hmm
then come home for break. That's good. I'm
Yeah,
sure your parents appreciate having you in the house for a little bit longer anyway.
yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
So at school, you live on campus? You
I do.
don't have an
Yes.
apartment? Okay.
No, they have opportunities for you to live off campus. Like we have off campus housing that you can do. But next year I'm going to be an RA, so
Oh.
I'm
Oh, yeah, you're
going
gonna
to
be
be an
on
RA
campus.
for the. So I have to live on campus. I mean, you can live in the townhouses and be an RA, but I like more to live in the dorms
Okay. So how are
than.
their dorms set up there? Is it like two people in a room, bathroom down the hall, shower down the hall?
Well, it depends on if you choose a single, double, or a single, double, or a triple, or a quad. So they have different
Okay.
options for how many people you want to live together, and then they have communal bathrooms and a kitchen and
Okay.
things like that. But sometimes there's a little sink room between two of the bedrooms, so you have like a mirror and a sink, so you don't have to go to the
Oh,
bathroom
I
if you
got
don't
you.
have to like just like wash your
You just
face or
gotta wash
something.
up, yeah.
Yeah, so you just use the sink room and then they have the communal bathrooms.
So you're going in junior year, so
Mhm.
you've been there for 2 years.
Yes. Yes, I
So
have.
did you live in two different style rooms or the same style the whole time?
Same style. I lived in a double both years, but my freshman year, my roommate actually, she just left.
Oh,
She went
wow.
home for February break because we have
Winter
like
break.
October break,
Yeah,
winter break, February break, and then Easter break.
yeah.
A lot of breaks, but February break she just didn't come back. And I was like, "Where are you?" And she's like, "Oh, I've decided not to come back to campus." I was like, "You're just not going to tell me that you decided not to come back?"
Yeah.
And she ended up coming back a few weeks later and taking her stuff with her,
Oh,
and
so
she's
you
totally dropped out. So I had a double as a single,
right, it's a
which is
huge
really
room,
cool. Yeah, it was
right?
awesome. And
Yeah.
then I had a roommate last year.
Okay. All right,
Mm,
good. So you kind of lucked out a little bit.
a little, yeah.
Too bad they're not in school anymore,
No.
but you kind of lucked
A
out.
little, yeah.
All right, so we just want to know about you a little bit. Maybe we can bless somebody that's just like you, right?
Yes.
Right. Um, so what's your earliest memory of growing up in the faith? So you were raised in the church.
I was, yes.
All right. So what's your earliest memory? So obviously you don't remember when you were a baby, right?
Yeah.
So what's your earliest memories of the church?
My earliest memory was we used to live in Chicago where my uncle has a church there.
Okay.
And we all, like, my whole family went to the same church, pretty much.
Oh, wow.
So my mom and my aunts and uncles would be on the ensemble group, and then me and my cousins would be running around in the church during the ensemble
Right,
practice.
right.
So I just remember like dancing along to the music that they were singing
Yeah.
to, and like hanging out with my cousins
Okay.
and different stuff like that. So, but there are pictures when I was like really little of me like dancing on stage
I'm sure,
at
yeah.
my uncle's church. So I don't know. I've always been kind of a part of the church.
So I remember we were doing children's church probably, my wife and I were doing children's church probably what, 7 years ago?
Hmm.
And our friend Sophie here was our helper some of the time for the church. She was just a young teenager then,
Hmm.
13 maybe. But
Yep.
yeah, so you were always involved in ministry too a little bit. So that's good,
Yeah, I
right?
always loved helping out with the children's ministry, even like VBS and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yep, yep.
Hmm.
All right. Is your family still, your cousins and everything still in
Oh
Chicago?
yeah, my whole family is in Chicago except for my grandparents, and then I
Oh,
have on my dad's side they live in Boston,
yeah,
but
yeah.
my whole mother's side still lives all in Chicago, in
Okay.
that area.
All right. So from Chicago to Boston, in the middle, Elmira.
Yes.
All right. We'll count it. We'll count it.
Hmm.
Oh, so what you kind of talked about it with your family dynamic. So what was kind of your family dynamic growing up in the faith? Like what was your role and your parents' role in the church?
Um, my mother was always on the worship team. She still is.
Yeah.
As
Like
she should
that's
be.
what
As
she
she
does.
should.
Yes.
As she should.
My dad always did like we called them the Royal Rangers, which was the boys ministry
Okay.
at Central where
Yeah, I
we
remember.
used to
Yeah.
go. So he did that, and then he would like help out wherever he felt like he wanted to help out. He's always been kind of like I don't know to himself in a
Yeah.
way because we're a lot like each other in that way. So my mom was a lot more like up front in the way that she worked in the
Yeah.
church through ministry, and then my dad was kind of in the background
As
helping
a
out.
support. Yeah.
Yeah, and then um, like growing up, we just did like choir and stuff
Okay.
like that. But my sister is the same way as my mom. She's always been like up front, like doing singing for the church or helping out with the children, things like that.
Right.
And then I kind of just helped out wherever I could. I
Okay.
guess whenever someone asked me to do something, if I felt comfortable doing it.
You would do it.
I guess, yeah.
We.
Or if I was forced to do it.
So that's it's what your sister sang in our baptism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool.
Most people, yeah.
I don't remember that.
Right, right. It's just one of those things, right?
Yeah.
So that I want to talk about that because you kind of alluded to it, and I'm sure a lot of kids out there that grew up in the church had this similar experience, right? Um, did you have any difficulties at home because you're growing up in the faith? Not and I don't mean like family structure difficulties. I
Mhm.
mean, what did you struggle with as a young teenager? Um, but in an all Christian home, and were there any struggles, or was it just kind of a breeze? You mentioned not being able to read.
Yeah, there were certain things that I couldn't do that my friends could do that really frustrated me.
Okay.
Like up until like freshman year in high school, I wasn't allowed to go to dances because that is like a
Oh,
big stickler in my family
okay.
because my grandparents are very traditional in that way, and then my mom kind of took over that kind of more
Okay.
traditional view. So it was a fight trying to be able to go to dances.
So when
And
was your first dance?
I was allowed to go to the little stupid middle school dances.
Okay.
Those were like whatever. My first dance was sophomore homecoming at my new school, and I I wrote my mom a letter, and I was like, I think that I deserve to go to this dance.
All right.
And all this stuff, and it ended up getting that as a Christmas present. Was a ticket and dress to go to the winter dance.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
all right.
so that was like my first big dance. And then like I don't know, after that, like just like certain things I just wasn't allowed to do because like as a Christian you have to uphold like a certain like standard of living. So like I mean, I think growing up like my whole life in the church, like it was a little bit easier to like understand, oh like yeah, this makes sense why I'm not supposed to do this, but it was like frustrating as a teenager. Like I want to be able to do those things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want to disappoint my parents, and like my moral compass in a way won't let me do them.
Yeah.
Because I'm like afraid of getting in trouble or something. So I think just being a part of the church like my whole life, I don't know, kind of set me up to not always want to do the things that other kids wanted to do. So I don't know.
So you didn't have, because you grew up in the faith and because you had those everyone with you, you're saying like you didn't have the desire to do some of the things anyways.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, there were things that I wanted to do. Like I wanted to have a boyfriend when I was 13.
Right.
But we had made the rule that I wouldn't start dating until I was 17. And then like getting asked to a dance, like I wanted to say yes, but there's another thing in my family where I'm not allowed to date anybody who isn't a Christian. Okay. And like that has become like part of my who doesn't have the same faith as me. So, but when I was younger, that was super frustrating because there were guys that I liked equally as much as they did.
Yeah.
But I wasn't allowed to go with them. So I was like, man, I wish this wasn't a thing.
Right.
But at the same time, it kind of protected me from
absolutely
unnecessary drama that I could have gotten into.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is there things that you appreciate about it?
Yeah.
Like now?
Yeah, at the time I was like, why is this a thing? This is ridiculous. But now, like looking at like other people and the struggles that they have so much drama and so many issues.
Right.
Because they've gotten to so many bad relationships. And I mean, like I haven't had like that much luck with guys currently, but it has protected me from mistakes that I could have made.
He just hasn't come along yet.
Exactly.
He's out there.
He is there. He is
yeah.
there. God lines that up,
Yeah.
and I think that's something that we do appreciate, and we underestimate the impact of a bad relationship and how that could set you back. I mean, I remember being a teenager, and you're being in a bad, you don't want to go to school the next day, or or you're doing wrong things at school, and you define your parents, and then getting in trouble there. So one bad relationship ends up having this ripple effect.
It's crazy how much it impacts you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've still like had bad experiences with guys. Like it doesn't protect you from everything. It's like it still happens, but it has protected me from so much worse that could have happened.
Yeah.
If I had go on a date with somebody. And I mean, a guy did come and he came to my church because he wanted to take me to prom.
Okay,
he
so
came
he
to
came
Central,
to the church.
And was
he
like,
came to
I'm
the
gonna
church.
meet your parents, and I'll convince them that this is a good idea to let you go to prom with me. And we ended up taking him to dinner, and then I'm super awkward just in general.
Okay.
And he came to dinner, and my parents were like, we have this thing, and we really don't want to like be lenient with our rule of not dating anyone who's not a Christian. And he's like, I completely understand. Like, if I was in charge of like my little sister, I would want the same thing. Like, pretty much said the right things to my parents. But then he messaged me that night and was like, this was great. Like, it was so great meeting your parents. Like, I really like you even more. And I said, thank you. And that was it. That's all that had happened. Like, he didn't talk to me anymore after that because my little awkward self didn't know how to reciprocate. But it was like, so like those things, like I was still affected by.
Yeah.
I was like, why aren't you messaging me? Like, it was like a stupid teenage thing to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So like even though I had these rules and I didn't date anyone, like I still had
These
the
moments.
drama, but
Yeah.
it could have been so much worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of like the part of life we have to go through that a little bit. You
Yeah.
know, that awkwardness and that
Oh, yeah.
rejection a little bit, and
Uh-huh.
you know, and the difficult part, even the part of him coming to the church and
I
having
know,
to
it was
ask him.
crazy. It was so funny.
Hey, but that means you're valuable, right?
Yeah,
That just
yes.
means you're valuable. Your parents think you're valuable,
Yep.
right? You don't protect something that you don't think is valuable,
Yeah.
right? So I mean I kind of talked about this, um, about the possible social difficulties growing up in the faith. So
Yeah.
really, we're talking now later in high school. You know, was there any social difficulties, or did you blend in well?
What about
Because you went to
like
public school, so
Yeah,
what
I did.
about like friends?
Yeah, I had a lot of non-Christian friends growing
Was
up.
that like okay? That was allowed?
Well, so I was pretty open about me being a Christian and like I don't drink and I don't smoke and I was like, guys, I just don't like the party scene. So they all knew that I was a Christian and I think they wished that I was more rebellious in a way because they all wanted me to do what they were doing, but I just had no desire to do it because of how I was raised.
right.
So there were times where I wish that I didn't have those rules because I wanted to participate with
Yeah.
them, but at the same time, like I didn't want to ruin that like reputation that I had.
Okay.
And like growing up, my dad had always said, you uphold the Tierney name, like you uphold our name, and however you go out in the world and show yourself, like reflects on your family.
Yeah.
So that was always a big thing, like in the back of my mind.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
if I do this, will it affect how like I'm viewed or my family's viewed? So there were times when my friends were like, "Wow, I wish you drank and I wish you had partied with us." But they were pretty like respectful of like what I
Of your
believed
beliefs
in.
and your morals.
So they never tried like to peer pressure you or
No, and I feel like I'm so stubborn that I wouldn't let them do it. Like I
Okay.
was always like, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to do that. I'll go and I'll hang out with you, but if you're gonna go partying after, you need to just take me home because
Mhm.
I don't like like I'm not one of those people who even if I wasn't a Christian wouldn't enjoy that. Like that's just not my personality.
Okay.
So I think that at the same time, we're like,
Yeah.
they're like, oh yeah, it's just Sophie. Like she wouldn't
That's not
enjoy
what she
it.
does it right.
Yeah, and like even at like the high school dances that I went to, I ended up always being on the side, like reading a book on my phone because I didn't go with a date and I had no one
Oh,
to dance
right,
with.
right.
So like I didn't care, so I would just be reading a book and they're like, that's Sophie. She's not gonna enjoy this if we take her out to a party.
Right.
So I think they were pretty like accepting of it, of like me being a Christian.
And you've came to the realization that's God made you with this
Yeah,
personality,
I just don't like that kind of stuff.
and what you don't like and you do like, and that's great,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I'm sure they wish that I did drink and that I went partying, but
Listen, I bet you if you talk to them, some of them probably are like, "Ooh, I wish I was Sophie right now."
Yeah.
Right?
yeah,
I wish I
so
was Sophie right now, at least for a moment.
yeah, and I
You
think
know?
also like choosing the right kind of friends too, that even if they aren't Christians, like are still willing to accept you. Like it's like a two-way street with that. Like I accept them to be not Christians and like I still love on them, but they also need to accept that I am a Christian.
Yeah.
So the fact that I had those friends in high school like really helped.
Well, I think that's important too to understand is that we shouldn't give up you know,
Mm-hmm.
you accept them. As
Yeah.
Christians, we're called to accept them.
Yeah.
But, you know, if we're talking friendship, they have to accept you.
Yeah, and
Right?
like I had the balance. Like I had really good Christian friends. Like I have a really close friend Anastasia, who she's been like a sister to me my whole life.
Yeah.
So having the balance of having Christian friends and non-Christian
Mhm.
friends kind of evens it out. So then you're grounded with your Christian friends, but at the same time, you
Okay.
kind of have other people to like show you the world.
Right, right,
Because you're
you're
not
right,
in
right.
like the Christian bubble that we call it the Christian bubble at Houghton.
Okay.
because you're stuck
Because
in the
Houghton
Houghton
is a
bubble.
Christian
It is a
college,
Christian
So
right?
do you have any of that goes on at college though? Like people that have tried to get you to like go to parties
There's
or
nothing to do at Houghton College, and there's
okay.
no parties like
Okay.
around. I'm
Not
sure
even like off campus, like
it's a dry county, so there's
Oh,
no
wow.
alcohol
Yeah,
in the
okay.
area. It really is in
really?
the middle of like a
I
cornfield.
never knew that.
It's crazy.
Well, the college I work at is in the, well, it's on a lake, but it
Yeah.
is in the middle of
It's
nowhere as
in
well. Yeah.
literally in the middle of everything. Like any big like shopping center is like an hour to an hour and a half away from Houghton College.
Okay.
So it's literally stuck in the middle of two cornfields. Like if you drive past, there's a cornfield on one side, another one on the other side, and another cornfield in front of it. Like we call it the Christian cornfield because there's literally nothing to do. So Houghton has like parties and they have like dances that they host,
Oh, okay.
but unless you're in that like small like percentage of people who do like that kind of stuff, then you wouldn't know about any of the parties or anything going
Right.
on. Like I'm sure they happen, but unless you're like a part of that really tiny amount of people who do party, then you don't go
You don't know.
partying.
Yeah.
Like there's
Right.
nothing to do. And there's just so much. It's so like they have such a high academic standard
Yeah.
that there's really no time to party.
And there's no
Yeah.
room for
There's
error,
yeah.
right?
So yeah, there's really nothing to
All
do.
right, all right. So that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, that's good. So I want to ask you a question.
Mhm.
I was going to backtrack a little bit, but we were talking about friends, and I guess this applies to your life at college as well. But you talked about Anastasia being a close Christian friend that you
Mhm.
grew up in the faith with, and then you talk about other friends that aren't Christian. Are there certain, do you have something are there certain criteria, I guess, of what you go to the Christian friends with? As far as the stuff you share, the advice you want, the type of advice you want, and then the or activities, and then what you do with your non-Christian friends. Is there, or is it they're all the same as far as that goes?
I think I go to my Christian friends more on like dating advice than I do with my non-Christian friends,
Okay.
but I still vent to my non-Christian friends.
Okay.
Like, cause they're an outlet, but they're like, I don't care. Like, you can just tell me pretty much. Like, it's
Right.
pretty much non-judgmental.
Okay.
It's non-judgmental with your Christian friends as well, but it's a lot more easier to vent to because I know they've done a lot worse than I have.
Oh my
So I
God.
can be like, man, I'm so mad. And they're like, okay, Sophie, it's okay. And then we just move on. But like with my Christian friends, I'm like, I will vent pretty much the same things to them, but I'll want more like solid advice from
Okay.
them because I know that they're going to give me like the perspective that I need
Okay.
and like the right type of advice because
Right.
I know that if I said, man, I really want to go out with this guy, they'll be like, no, Sophie, he's not a good dude. He's not a Christian.
Right.
But if I go to like my non-Christian friends, they'd be like, yeah, just go for it.
Yeah, just
It's
try
gonna
it
be great.
out. Try it
You
out.
never
Okay.
know.
Right.
He could turn out to be really great, and then you can lead him to your faith or something like that. So like, it's different advice that I would want to get
Right.
from them.
And you know that beforehand.
Oh yeah.
You know that. Yeah.
And I've known them for long enough. Like I've known like most of my Christian friends for a lot longer because
Right.
we either went to the same church when we were little or just like I spent more time with them. But my non-Christian friends, like I went to school with them, so I spent 3 years straight in school with them.
Right.
So like we know each other on kind of different levels. So there are things that I'll go to both of them for different things. So it
Okay.
really depends on what kind of advice I want to get
All right.
or if I want to share certain things with them or not.
Okay. Well, that's good to know,
Right.
right? And we do got to do that, right?
Mhm.
So we talked about college.
Mhm.
Was the transition to college? How was that? As far as leaving home, you know, did you call home a lot? Did you come home every weekend? Did
I
you?
I wasn't allowed to come home until October break.
Oh,
That
that's what
was
your
that
parents?
was the rule my mother made for me because she needed time to adjust to me not being there. So she's like, if I see you, I'm not going to be able to adjust to you not being at home.
Right.
So you're not going to be able to be as independent as you need to be.
Mm.
And I only go to school an hour and a half away.
Right.
So it's pretty close to home, but at the same time, I have my independence.
Yeah.
Like, my mother won't be on my campus like every weekend.
Right.
Because it's just not doable. So I wasn't allowed to go home until my first break at school.
So how was that?
I
Emotionally?
think I've always been the kind of person who adjusts to different situations really easily. Like, I've just, like, moving or just new experiences, like, I've been able to really, like, be flexible with those somehow. Like, I guess my personality just allows me to be flexible.
Yeah.
And I love new experiences. So I think adjusting to college life was really easy for me. But I think just finding the balance of fun and having work, like doing work,
Yeah.
was a little bit difficult because I am the biggest procrastinator in the whole world. It's really bad.
I think that's twice we heard this from a Christian
It's so
podcast.
bad. There was one time in high school where I didn't know I was in AP history until I got my schedule. Like,
Oh,
that
you didn't even
semester,
know.
I
Oh.
had no idea I was in there. So I didn't know that we had a summer project that we had to do. And I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't know I was in here. I thought I dropped the class. And I was like, I'll take the class, but
I didn't do the summer project.
Can you give me until the middle of the semester to do it? And my teacher was like, yeah, that's okay. You can totally do it. I waited until like 4 or 5 days before the project was due to start the project. And I had to read a whole book, like write a whole essay on it, do a project. And I went to my mom's like, hey, so I procrastinated really hard on this. Can you help me? And we ended up like doing the whole project like 4 days before it was due. And I ended up getting like a B on it.
Oh my gosh. So he
like,
already gave you a break by saying you can do it.
Yeah,
and...
I had a whole semester to do it.
Right.
I didn't do it. And then I was like, Mom, can you help me? She still is upset about it. I know. But it's bad. Like, my final project for the semester for one of my class, my biblical class, I had like 3 weeks to do it. And I did it at 11 o'clock the night before it was due. And it was due at 8 a.m. I got it done. And I passed the class with a B, but it's bad.
That's living on a tightrope, man.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Your guys' anxiety at college. Jeez.
It was a bad week, and I didn't go to bed till 3 in the morning that night.
Yeah.
And I had to get up at 6 to go print out a photo for the project. And I went to the class. I was like, I'm just gonna find a photo from my gallery of photos that I've taken and try and see if I can find something that'll match up with this project. And I did, and it was like, this is a phonograph horn, and I'm doing my project on the female prophets of the Old Testament, and many of the female prophets were singers, and they did music, and this is symbolizes the music, the horn that came. I was like, this is, I don't know, I don't even know how I passed, but I did.
Hey, what you did, but I'm starting to see that that's a little common in the college life.
Yeah,
no sleep.
It's bad.
Papers at midnight.
It's so bad.
Right.
I had to write a 3-page paper on typography for a web design class, which is pretty much 3 pages on font.
Yeah.
And I did it that night that it was due. It was bad. I'm such a bad procrastinator. So, like,
all right. So we need to improve that.
I had to find the balance, and I'm still a bad procrastinator. But like, being able to get everything done and doing it well, like, that's like the thing that I had to figure out how to do.
Well, and that's what college is for. That's what this time away, most people don't know, or maybe some people do know, is that universities or colleges were created for Christians to go away, find their faith, develop their faith, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the baccalaureate ceremonies come from and everything.
It really helps though that for like the requirements at home college, you have to take a certain amount of biblical classes.
Yeah.
So I've had Old Testament history, and I've had to do classes on different things with the Bible, and I don't know, it's really like opened my eyes to like how to properly read the Bible
Okay.
and like how to really study the word.
Yeah.
And without that, like I wouldn't have had the perspective that I have
That
now.
you have now.
And like I know for me, and I'm sure a lot of other Christian kids who grew up in the faith, like they have the views that their parents have.
Right.
So going to college and getting like my own perspective and my own thoughts and views on Christianity and God, I don't know, has really helped me grow as a Christian. But I don't read my Bible as much as I should. Like I'm the first one to admit it. But
Yeah.
knowing that I have this like kind of
It's kind of built in.
back like foundation that I've built like through my first 2 years of college has like really helped as well.
Yeah. You know, I think you hit on an interesting point is that, and I think I'm glad you said it because we do have to have our own personal relationship, and you're at the age where that has to start kicking in.
Yeah.
And you start to realize that you're not really having a relationship with Jesus. You're just living off tradition of your family tradition.
Yeah.
And
that helps, like,
yeah.
to be able to have your own traditions, but to be able to grow them and, like, evolve them into how you want to kind of be a Christian.
Yeah.
I think is also really important. And it helps that home college is very Christian.
Yeah.
And they're very traditionally Christian.
Now, is there like a service on Sundays, or like what's your church like at school?
So Houghton College doesn't have its own church service on Sundays for students, but I can walk. There's literally a Wesleyan church right across the street from the school, so I can walk to. It's very different from what I've grown up in, because like we grew up in the Pentecostal church.
Yeah, yeah.
My mom is very, very Pentecostal, which is good. She's great, but like it was very different because they don't clap, they don't speak in tongues, they don't like raise their voices in the
Really?
congregation, like at school. Because I go to Houghton's Wesleyan College.
Okay.
So during chapel services, they don't clap after the songs are done.
Oh, it's just
everyone just sits down. Like no, and if you do clap, like it's weird. Like people look at you like you're an alien. Like it's like I find it weird now when I'm in chapel. Like it's not weird when I come home to Fusion, but when I'm in chapel and I see someone like getting crazy, like
you look
they're,
at
like,
them like,
in
what are
the
you
spirit,
doing?
They're like, it's the weirdest thing because now I'm used to like you say thanks be to God after every, because they read or start like a Bible verse and you're like, thanks be to God, and then you sit down, no one claps, like it's very odd if you do. So now I am in that mindset now. It's a very, very traditional way of worshiping. So,
but you're getting your worship in.
Yeah.
It might be different.
My mom wishes that I went to like church on every Sunday, but I don't because I go to chapel 3 days a week.
Oh.
So like I am getting it, and I should go to church every Sunday, but there are days where I'm so tired from the week.
Well, then again, you're developing, right? Your personal relationship, like you said. So you're getting it, and then by the time you're done with college, you'll have your view on it.
Do you do like a devotional daily or anything like that, or no?
I should.
That's okay.
But I don't. I've been trying to. I do. I would be like, I'm gonna do my devotional, and I'll last for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I'll like slowly drift off. It's like I haven't done it in 4 weeks. It's bad. It really is. But I don't know. It's part of the process, I guess.
Well, it is. Most of us that do devotionals, like us, don't write 2,000 word papers on Old Testament as
Old
part
Testament
of our
prophets.
right. So your devotional is your education process at the same time. It's like the same thing if you work in your ministry. If you're like that's a good thing. We shouldn't take that away from that's a blessing. So let me ask you this. All right, so I got kind of like 2 final questions.
Okay.
This is your chance to pastor somebody else out there. You ready?
That's a lot of pressure. Okay.
So, what advice would you give someone right now, a younger you, if you will, that's maybe a junior going into senior year of high school? What advice would you give them as far as their transition into going away to college, in their faith? in keeping their faith.
Well, first, I would recommend visiting more than 2 colleges.
Okay.
Because
You only visited 2 colleges?
I only visited 2 colleges.
What was the other one?
Actually, it was 3, but still. I went to North Point Bible College in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And then we stopped by Liberty University, and it was like, wow, this is too big. This is stressing me out. It's like, no, this is not happening.
I know your dad wanted you to go.
My dad really wanted me to go. He still wants me to transfer to Liberty. He wants to go to the football games.
Yeah, of course, right? Yeah.
And then coming to Houghton, like, I knew, like, the moment I took the tour, I was like, wow, this feels like home. So, like, waiting for that feeling that you get.
Okay.
Like, you'll know you're meant to be there.
So visit, expose yourself to the...
Yeah, and I mean, I love Houghton College, but I wish I had seen more colleges to, like, be absolutely sure that that was where I wanted to go. Because I only applied to Houghton College.
Oh, so you visited, but you only...
It was the only college I applied to.
Oh, wow.
For my entire junior year. It's the only college I applied to. So I was taking a risk there. So I would go visit more colleges, but also, I don't know, being more open, not being more open, just being open to going to chapel services and experiencing new types of worship and just like being flexible to experience new ideologies, because you're going to get that if you go to a Christian college, because there's a lot of different things that you have to like take, different like religion classes that you have to take. Like I'm sure it's different for different colleges.
Yeah.
But you definitely get exposure to a lot of different religious views. So just being open to that. Like I was open. Like I wasn't shut off from that because like I've been surrounded by many different cultures. Like growing up.
Absolutely.
But just being able to accept like diversity. I think when you go to different colleges, because I know for some people it's really hard to accept that diversity.
Some people get offended, really.
Do you have something like, did anything with your mindset change since you've been at college and exposed to different people who their foundation may be Jesus, but you know, the way they do it may be a little bit different?
Right.
Or
the way they apply
is there
the
anything
gospel.
that happened that you're like, oh my gosh, I used to think that this was like horrible, and you know, like,
I don't know. I can't, not really off the top of my head, was there like one experience?
Not like things that go against Jesus,
No,
but
yeah,
you know,
of
how
course.
some people, you know, whether it be
like the
tattoos
Wesleyan,
or whether it be, you know, like something practical like that. Like, oh, I used to view this way, but now I'm like, you know.
I don't know. That's a really hard question. Because, like, I grew up, like, my parents always raised me to be very, like, accepting and open of, like, different people and different cultures. Like, my mom taught English as a second language when I was little. So she would take me to her different, like, groups of people. So I would have, the Muslim, the Indian people would give me food, and, like, I would hang out with them. So, like, and then growing up in like Chicago, like I've always been surrounded by a lot of different cultures. And like my mom growing up in Argentina. So I think just having that foundation of like so many cultures surrounding me has really helped me be flexible with those different things. And I don't think there was one thing that did happen that I was like, wow, that's very different than mine. I think it was just like the worship style at home college.
Okay.
It was like, wow, I don't know how I'm gonna get used to this because it's so traditional.
So that maybe that's it. Maybe that's the answer to the question.
Maybe.
Is but because now you're somewhat used to it, right?
Yeah,
so,
I think that might be it. Was the worship style and the way that they do Houghton College, like their chapel services. Like I grew up singing hymns, but that's pretty much like what they do is they sing lots and lots of hymns all the time. So that wasn't really odd to me, but just like the such like
the behavior,
traditional, like very uptight way of worshiping, at least what I experienced, was because like, well, how we worship like at Fusion is not uptight. Like everyone's very like open.
That's right.
And just very loud with how they worship, which is a good thing. It's a good thing, but it's true. Like it's a very loud way of worshiping, and that's very different than how college worships.
Okay.
So I think that might be it.
Okay. All right. That there's different ways to. No, he's good. So all right. So this one is the big. This is the big one.
Oh no.
Right.
Okay.
So what advice would you give your parents? So you've said some great things about them. What advice would you give parents of someone like you that's getting ready, going into senior year, getting ready to go off to college, you know, they're Christ lovers, they're believers, what advice would you give parents to help promote?
I think just trusting that you've raised your child
Okay.
good and that it's time to like let them like make their own decisions and to like I don't know make mistakes and to I don't know because I have a feeling that Christian parents are very like they're sticklers on being a certain way and acting a certain way and getting like the best grades and just being like as good and like almost perfect as you can be. And I think just allowing your child to, I don't know, kind of be themselves and make those mistakes that they have to make
Right.
in college,
Right.
like failing a class,
Yeah.
or doing different stuff like that. I don't know. I think just trusting that they're gonna do the right thing based off how you raise them.
Okay. So just trust them.
Just trust them.
Just trust them. It's like that's the hardest thing to do, right? Let
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, because you've raised them to make the right choices and to like do the right thing based on like the morals that you've given them and the morals that you've helped instill in them.
Right.
So just trusting that they're gonna stick to those morals. I mean, I'm not a very rebellious person, but there are gonna be times when other people are rebellious,
Right.
and just believing that it really is just a phase.
Okay.
It really is. I mean, once they like fail, then they'll smack them in the face.
Right.
It happens.
Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes we need failure for success.
Yes.
All
Yeah.
right. So that's advice that you'd give parents, right?
Yeah.
So you gave us some advice for the younger you. You gave us some advice for parents out there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to share?
No.
No? All right. Well, thanks for joining us, right? Good job. We can clap.